CloudTrade's rule system, part 7, what happens after capture. We now reach the stage where we could look at what happens after the rules processing system completes. In terms of what we talked about before with block pictures, what we tend to call post-processing. Some of this post-processing is very close to rules processing. The intervention completion system is a little bit like that. It's all essentially the part of analytical capture. Some of it is rules based and some of which is written in native Prolog. So when the analytical capture process completes, it produces some document data which it then passes over to our post-processing system. This document data is built from the database which was populated by the rules, and it includes all the data that was captured and labeled and identified, the stuff that was provided by a user during intervention or completion, anything read from a database, anything calculated or deduced, and any results of any validation that our rule system passed on to us. Exactly what's present will be driven by the customer, because every time we bring a customer on, we go through a whole process of determining what validation they need, extrapolation they need, and so on. In terms of the languages that we use to program all this stuff, it's all Prolog within a .NET environment, but the rules are written using this rule system which is implemented within Prolog. We then use native Prolog for validation and extrapolation. The interface to intervention and completion is via JSON data structure, and the rules, are written by rules writers with a bit of knowledge in Prolog, but the rest of the stuff is written by Prolog programmers. Though a lot of the time these programmers tend to be graduated rules writers. All of this then communicates to the post-processing system, which again is written in Prolog, and again is written by not programmers but people who are graduated rules writers. This is all why we call it all configuration rather than development, because they're not proper programmers doing this sort of stuff. Validation has a strong connection with intervention, because generally if validation fails, we tend to go up to intervention to ask for help. The results of all the validation are then recorded into document data. Typically what we do is we check for mandatory items, or we look to see whether items are consistent with each other, or we see if they're consistent against a database that we might have access to externally from the rule system, such as product codes, or we cross-reference against other documents that might have come at the same time, or even stuff that came some time ago which we've persisted in our database. Extrapolation is more of a connection with completion. Extrapolation is when basically we deduce further data that wasn't really there in our original document, but which we can calculate and extend, or even perhaps ask a user to provide for us in order to get, say, mandatory data, or where we have some limitations in the XML files that we're sending through which requires additional data to be provided, derived data from the document rather than the actual data, customer specific data from databases and so on, or even stuff that's been persisted from a previous document. We then get into output file creation. Most of the time what we're doing as a result of all of our analytical capture is producing some sort of a file that we are going to send to our customer's finance system, and they can be XML files, or sometimes even PDF files, or JSON files, or whatever. All of this is controlled by configuration, again not by programming, and we do lots and lots of these sort of things, and we do them for particular customers as well, where they want particular XML formats or JSON formats or so on. We can even actually take the image that arrived 64-bit encoded and stick it into the file that we post in. Once we have this file, we then have to get it to the customer. We may either email it, or we could FTP or HTTP if the customer has a standard input, or if they have a bespoke sort of REST interface, then we develop these interfaces for them, typically with 1 or 2 weeks development work so that we can post directly to the target systems. And we've got about 20 of these at the moment, so they're not at all unusual. And the information that goes into them, of course, is all the information that came out of the analytical capture. Finally, we have our reporting service, which allows our customers to see the documents flowing through their system, to see what's currently in progress, and that's all online and real time, obviously. Uses the same application that we use for intervention and completion. And then we have our sort of reporting backend, which is where the results of all the work that we do goes into a big database, and we have interfaces that allow our customers to run reports on this database and see what sort of service they're getting. And the various files that have come in and come out are also put into document storage as required, and customers again can go and access the individual documents themselves.